My people, we often talk about Black potential, Black brilliance, Black creativity, and I love it. But rarely do we tell the full, unfiltered truth. Black genius didn't just influence the West, it built the West. The wealth of America, the industrial rise of Europe, the global culture the world celebrates today, all of it carries the fingerprints of African people. So if Black genius builds the West, imagine what it could build at home. Imagine what it could build for Africa. Imagine for a second what it could build for the entire Black world. So today, we're breaking it all down, the history, the moment we're living in, and the future we could create if we chose to build together. Not emotionally, not romantically, but clearly, strategically, and with receipts. Let's break it down. So before we can talk about returning home, before we talk about rebuilding Africa, we have to confront a truth the world has spent centuries trying to bury. Black people have already built a civilization before. It's the one we're living in right now. And I'm not talking in metaphors, okay? I'm talking about real, measurable, historical, economic fact. When you peel back the layers of America's rise, when you strip away the mythology of hard work and frontier grit, what you find at the center is a single engine: Black labor. That's African skill, African resilience, African genius. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, I want to invite you to join our family here at Panagenius TV and be a part of conversations that are shaping the future. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for alerts. And if you want to support our work and help us reach more people, you can drop a super thanks on this video or join our growing membership community. Thank you so much for your support. Let's get back to the show. So let's start with the United States. America's entire early economy from the 1600s to the Civil War was built on the backs of enslaved Africans. Tobacco, rice, sugar, and later cotton didn't just make plantations rich, they made the nation rich. Cotton alone became the backbone of the global economy. At its peak, it accounted for over half of all of U.S. exports. Now, that wealth funded banks. It built railroads, created insurance empires, and financed America's Industrial Revolution. Yes, Wall Street, yes, the Wall Street that we know of today, it started as a literal slave market. Major banks we praise today built wealth by financing or insuring enslaved people. But Black people didn't only build America through forced labor. We built its infrastructure, laying railroad tracks, digging canals, constructing ports and forts. We built its innovation, from the invention of the lawnmower to the gas mask to the modern traffic system, yes, red, gold, green, to the foundations of blood banking. We built its culture, talking about jazz, rock, blues, hip hop, the cultural exports that made America a global power. And what's wild is even after centuries of dehumanization, even after being locked out of education, land, capital, and freedom, our genius still rose. Now let's cross the ocean for a second. Europe's rise, the wealth of Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, didn't just come from factories and philosophy. It came from the sugar plantations of the Caribbean, the gold and palm oil taken from West Africa, the human beings transported across the Atlantic. Historians estimate that Britain's Industrial Revolution, the very foundation of modern Europe, was financed in large part by profits from enslaved African labor in the Caribbean. The ports of Liverpool, Bristol, and Lisbon flourished because ships carrying African captives filled their treasuries. European banks grew wealthy by lending to slave traders and planters. Entire cities in Europe owe their architecture, their universities, their foundations to profits extracted from African bodies. This is not revisionist history, okay? This is documented history. Go ahead, fact check it on your own. And yet, the world turned around and created a narrative that Africa is behind, Africa is poor, that the diaspora is lacking, that Black people must catch up. Catch up to who? We built the economies they're bragging about. We shaped the cultures they export. We powered the industries they still benefit from. We innovated under oppression and created beauty in the middle of brutality. So, my people, here's the billion-dollar question. If Black genius could build the West in chains while being denied freedom, denied land, denied humanity, imagine what that same genius could do if it were directed toward a continent that belongs to us, a continent that calls us its own, a continent that is waiting to rise. Because here's the truth the world never wanted us to realize. We have already built the West, y'all. But now, maybe it's time to build our home. So now that we've grounded ourselves in what Black genius built for the West, let's talk about why Africa is calling the diaspora now. Because this moment we're living in is not symbolic, it's strategic. And today, Africa is standing at one of the most important turning points in modern history. Yes, cities are rising at record speed. New ports, highways, tech hubs, creative districts, whose landscapes are transforming. And the biggest driver of it all is Africa's people. Because by 2050, Africa will have the largest workforce on earth. 1 in every 3 young people alive will be African. Think about what that means. The world's future doctors, engineers, creators, scientists, and entrepreneurs will come from one continent. At the same time, Africa is building its own economic foundation. We've talked about the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is creating a unified market of 1.3 billion people. Now, if it succeeds, it will be the largest single market in the world. Industries are emerging everywhere. Fintech in Nigeria, digital marketplaces in Kenya, creative industries in Ghana and South Africa, clean energy in East Africa, manufacturing pipelines from Southern Africa to the Sahel. For the first time, African economies aren't just consuming the world's innovation, they're creating it. And global powers see this. The US, China, Europe, Russia, India, the Gulf states. Everyone is competing for influence on the continent. They understand something powerful. Africa will shape the next world order. But here's the tension. Africa has the resources, it has the youth, the culture, the land, but not enough engineers, not enough system builders, not enough policymakers, not enough negotiators, not enough high-tech specialists to match the skill of its potential. So the continent is rising, but it risks rising without ownership, growing without controlling the value, expanding without shaping the narrative. And this, my people, is why the diaspora matters. Africa has the momentum, but the diaspora has the expertise, the exposure, and the global networks that can turn that momentum into real power. In other words, Africa has the fire, but the diaspora has the fuel. And the magic, it will happen when the two meet. So this is the crossroads, and it is a once-in-a-lifetime generation So this is the crossroads. And it is a once-in-a-generation moment where Africa could either rise with strength or rise in a way that benefits everyone else but Black people. And the diaspora is the missing link. So my people, now that we've looked at Africa's crossroads, let's talk about what could happen if the diaspora actually answered the call. Not all of us, not even most of us, but just a tiny fraction. I'm talking about the scientists, the creatives, the storytellers, the entrepreneurs, the engineers, the educators, the deal makers, people who've worked inside the systems Africa is trying to build today. Because here's the truth. If Black genius built the West under oppression, I just want you to imagine what it could build for Africa with intention. Even a small reconnection, strategic, consistent, collaborative, would change everything. Imagine African tech hubs infused with diaspora engineers who've worked at Google, Apple, Amazon, Meta, and trust and believe. There's a lot of them. Imagine African hospitals shaped by diaspora doctors who are trained at world-class institutions. Nigerians account for over 80% of doctors here in the U.S. So imagine what that could be if they were to return home. Imagine African universities guided by professors who've taught in the top academic systems. Imagine African companies scaling globally with diaspora marketers, strategists, and creatives who understand how global markets move. That alone would accelerate Africa's development by decades. But the impact doesn't stop on the continent, right? Because a stronger Africa gives the diaspora global leverage. For the first time, Black people everywhere would have a powerful homeland, politically, economically, and yes, culturally. That changes the way we were treated in the US, in Europe, in Latin America, in the Caribbean. It changes how we negotiate. It changes how we're represented. It just changes how our children see themselves. And there's something deeper too, right? A psychological shift. Because for centuries, so much of our identity has been shaped by displacement, the trauma of being taken away, scattered, fragmented. But the moment the diaspora reconnects with the continent, even symbolically, even strategically, even culturally, something powerful happens. We stop seeing Africa as a place we left and start seeing it as a place we're building or that we can build. Not a past, but a future we can look forward to. So just imagine it for a second with me, will you? The brilliance that builds the wealth of America, the creativity that shapes global culture, the innovation that drives the modern world, redirected, reclaimed, re-anchored. If even a fraction of us engage with Africa at that level, my people, the world would not be ready for what comes next. Oof. And I just felt the spirit of Marcus Garvey and Kwame Nkrumah right now in this room. Now, I wish this story were as simple as Africa is rising, so let's pack our bags and all go home. But you and I both know it is not that simple. This is where we have to get honest and really, really, really honest. Because for many people in the diaspora, the desire to reconnect with Africa is there. But so is the hesitation. And those hesitations aren't imaginary. They're not excuses. They're rooted in lived experience, in history, in trauma, and real-world concerns. Let's name some of them, softly but truthfully. A lot of people fear corruption. They've heard stories of deals gone wrong, leaders who can't be trusted, contracts that are not honored, money that disappears into thin air. Some people also fear the bureaucracy, the endless paperwork, the slow systems, the comeback to moral culture that makes even simple tasks feel like battles. can imagine giving up the stability they've built abroad and the opportunities that they have here. When you've grown up in systems where things just work, where opportunities are there, it's hard to picture starting over in a place where nothing is guaranteed. There are people who fear being rejected. Yes, that's real. They're worried that locals will see them as outsiders, fake Africans, people who abandoned the continent or who aren't African enough, right? And some carry generational trauma too, the trauma of ancestors kidnapped, stripped of language, land, and identity. Reconnecting isn't just a flight. It is an emotional journey. And others simply don't know where to begin. Africa feels distant, overwhelming, complicated. You have 54 countries, hundreds of cultures, different laws, languages, markets, expectations. Where do you even go? Where do you start? And that's real. And then there's the cold truth many will never say out loud. Some diaspora communities don't fully trust African governments to protect their investments, honor their contributions, or just treat them as equal partners. And these are real fears, real wounds, real obstacles. And Africa cannot afford to dismiss them. Because if Africa wants its children to return home, it also has to prepare the home. It has to build systems that are clear, fair, transparent, and safe. It has to offer opportunities. It has to make the path smoother, not perfect by any means, but just predictable. It has to treat the diaspora not as wallets, not as tourists, but as collaborators and family. And to be fair, many African nations are trying. They're pushing really hard. The digital ID reforms, the diaspora bonds, the visa on arrival policies, the special investment zones, the birthright initiatives, the cultural restoration programs we're seeing. So the effort is there, but the work isn't finished. And this, my people, is where the conversation gets real. Because for this partnership to work, both sides have responsibilities. Africa has to become easier to engage. The diaspora has to become willing to try. Because the truth is, hesitation doesn't mean disconnection. It means people care. And they want to know that if they show up, Africa will show up too. And there, we've got some work to do. But, my people, now that we've talked about the fears, the hopes, and the possibilities, I love to give you the full picture, right? We need to clear up the biggest misconception in this entire conversation, which is, what does it mean to return home, right? Because returning home does not mean buying a one-way ticket and relocating to Africa. And I want to make that very clear that that is not my point here. That's not my ask. And honestly, that's not even realistic for most people. When I talk about the diaspora returning home, what I mean is reconnect, re-engage, reinvest, and rebuild in whatever way aligns with your life, your skills, your resources, and your calling. For some, yes, that may be relocation, but for many others, it may look completely different. For some, it might look like investing in a business from abroad or mentoring young Africans virtually. For others, it may look like consulting for a local company on strategy or launching a startup that operates in 1 or 2 or 3 countries. It could look like partnering with creatives, researchers, entrepreneurs, and policymakers across the ocean. Or coming home once a year, intentionally, to contribute, build relationships, or open doors. Returning doesn't have to be physical. It can be intellectual, financial, emotional, cultural, digital, or even seasonal. Because the truth is, Africa doesn't need every diaspora member to move back. Oh no, we're not ready for that yet, okay? Africa needs the diaspora to plug in, to help the continent rise to its potential. And as I said, my people, this is where we need to pause because reconnection is a two-way street. Yes, the diaspora has a role to play, but Africa's leaders have an equally important responsibility, and we cannot whisper around this. If we want the diaspora to come home, if we want them to bring their hard-acquired skills, their education, their experience, their networks, and their capital, then we must create a system that welcomes them, not frustrates them. The intention has to be matched with real action. That means real structural policies that make it easier to work, policies that make it easier to invest, policies that make it easier to live, build, and belong. It means simplifying visa processes, creating long-term residency options for diaspora Africans, offering dual citizenship pathways, protecting diaspora investments through transparent legal systems, building digital portals that remove bureaucratic red tape, ensuring that land rights and business registrations are clear, predictable, and fair, establishing diaspora investment zones and tax incentives, and that's a big one, implementing anti-corruption safeguards that encourage trust, and creating diaspora desks in every ministry that actually function. Because no matter how passionate this call is, no matter how beautiful the vision is, and no matter how big the opportunity is, you cannot ask people to return to a system that isn't ready to receive them. And we're seeing some of this in Ghana right now with the whole year of return. But we'll talk about that on another episode. So the point is that diaspora is willing, deeply willing, but people cannot build in a place where the rules aren't clear and the doors aren't open. This is where leadership matters, not symbolic leadership, not speeches, not emotional appeals, but practical, intentional, structural leadership that says, we want you home, and here are the policies that prove it. Here's a house with a key. Here's a car with, okay, maybe not a car, but let's start with the house. But seriously, when the diaspora reconnects even lightly, Africa rises. But when Africa reforms its systems to welcome the diaspora, Africa rises even faster. And when both sides do their part, my people, that's when history shifts. That's when we stop talking about potential and finally start talking about power. So, my people, where do we go from here? The truth is, when you look at our history, when you look at what Black genius has built for other nations, when you look at what our ancestors created with nothing but their minds, their hands, and their will to survive, you begin to realize something powerful. We have never been the problem. We have always been the engine. America knows it. Europe knows it. The Caribbean knows it. The world knows it. And now, finally, Africa must know it too. And not just know it, but activate it. Not in a vague, poetic, come home someday kind of way, but with strategy, with clarity, and with urgency. Because Africa is standing at a crossroads that only comes once in a century. A moment where 1.3 billion people, trillions in resources, the world's youngest population, and a rising economic force are converging at the exact same time. The potential alone doesn't build nations, does it? Because if it did, Africa would be way over the hill, if you know what I mean. It takes more than potential. It takes skill. It takes systems. It takes networks. It takes global experience. It takes vision. And yes, it takes all of us. And that's why the diaspora matters, not symbolically, but structurally. We must return home to build Africa, to build the Africa that we want to see, the future that we know is possible. If we helped build the wealthiest nations in the world, imagine what could happen if we turned that brilliance toward our own home. Imagine what we could build for ourselves. Imagine An Africa with world-class schools, an Africa designing its own technologies, an Africa producing its own medicines, an Africa shaping global culture, an Africa negotiating from a place of strength and not weakness, an Africa that is no longer spoken about but speaks for itself. Imagine what happens when the global Black family finally decides, we're done building for everyone else. We're done building every other dream. It's time to build our own. So I'll leave you with this question, and no, it is not rhetorical, okay? What does returning home, and I'll put that in quotes, what does returning home look like for you? And what role do you believe you can play in shaping Africa's next chapter? Because history is moving either way. Yes, it is. And the only question now is whether we will move with it, whether we will shape it, whether this time we will own it. Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's have this conversation together. I cannot wait to hear from you. So that's it for today's show. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did in researching and bringing you this story. And if you enjoyed it, then guess what? I want you to share it, not with 1, 2, 3, but with 10 people, your group chats on socials everywhere. And let someone know that Africa is waiting on them, that the future is waiting on them, and that they have a role to play in building the Africa, the Black world that we all want to see. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Sandra Bebu Boateng, and until next time, take care.
I wouldn't be proud to have the largest Somalian. Look at their nation. Look how bad their nation is. It's not even a nation. It's just people walking around killing each other. So Somalia is considered by many to be the worst country on earth. I don't know. I haven't been there. I won't be there anytime soon. I hope.
My people, I have to be honest. There are some stories that I bring you here on the breakdown that just shake me to the core. This story is one of them. When the world talks about Somalia today, they talk about crisis, instability, piracy, hunger, a nation fighting every single day just to hold itself together. And yes, we have to be honest. Somalia has endured a level of hardship that no country, no people should ever have to face. Decades of war, a collapsed state, foreign interference, generations growing up knowing nothing but struggle. But here's the part they never tell you. Somalia was not always like this. In fact, Somalia was once one of the most powerful, sophisticated, and strategically important civilizations on the entire African continent. A nation of sailors who ruled the Indian Ocean. A nation of nomads who could not be conquered. A nation that resisted a European empire for 21 straight years. A nation that once had the most powerful army in Africa, yes. A nation with a capital city so rich, so influential that China, Persia, and Arabia wrote about its beauty. And yes, there was also time when Somalia had one of the highest literacy rates in Africa, and a sense of unity the world now forgets. So today we're breaking it all down. How did Somalia rise? How did it fall? And what does the world keep getting wrong about one of Africa's most extraordinary nations? Because to understand Somalia today, you need to understand the Somalia that existed long before the headlines. And my people, I need you to do me a favor and share this video with your group chats. And let's amplify this history because the world needs to know the truth. This is The Breakdown. So before Somalia became a headline, before politicians called it garbage, a failed nation, and a lawless state where people simply kill each other. There was a Somalia the world respected, traded with, and in some cases, feared. Because long before Europe built its first strong navy, long before the Indian Ocean became a global highway, Somali sailors were already there, navigating it, mastering it, and owning their trade routes. Somalia wasn't isolated. Somalia wasn't disconnected. Somalia wasn't a country with no history, as some people want you to believe today. Somalia was plugged into the world deeply, powerfully, for thousands of years. Chinese explorers wrote about the wealth of Mogadishu. Arab traders described its markets as overflowing with gold, textiles, ivory, and spices. Persian historians wrote about Somali ships built with such precision and speed that they dominated the coastlines. Let me say that again. Somalia dominated the Indian Ocean, not as passengers, no, but as pioneers. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, I want to invite you to join our family here at Panagenius TV and be a part of conversations that are shaping the future. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for alerts. And if you want to support our work and help us reach more people, you can drop a super thanks on this video or join our growing membership community. Thank you so much for your support. Let's get back to the show. And this wasn't a one-century thing. This was a legacy, a civilization that grew from the sea, lived by the sea, and became powerful because of the sea. But it wasn't just maritime strength. What made Somalia extraordinary was its social design. A nation built on mobility, independence, and community strength. While other civilizations built walls, Somalia built networks. While others centralized power, Somalia spread authority through clan leadership in Zaire, one of the oldest surviving systems of customary law in Africa. And this unique combination, a trading empire on the coast, a mobile superpower inland, and a decentralized governance system, created a society that outsiders struggled to understand, let alone conquer. It's no wonder the Europeans had trouble. It's no wonder Somalia resisted so fiercely. It's no wonder their history gets erased, because it does not fit the narrative of a poor, weak, broken nation. Somalia was none of those things. Somalia was a force. So let's step back, far before the chaos, far before the headlines, to a time when Somalia was not struggling to survive, but thriving as one of the greatest maritime civilizations on the African continent. Because here's what they won't teach you in school. Somalia mastered the Indian Ocean long before Europe ever dreamed of it. While Europe was still figuring out the compass, Somali sailors were riding monsoon winds from East Africa to Arabia, Persia, and India, and back with scientific precision. These were not random fishermen. These were engineers, shipbuilders, navigators. Their vessels, the Bidin and the Mtepi, were so advanced in design that Chinese imperial fleets recorded them in their travel journals. Arab scholars wrote that Somali ports were cities of wealth and merchants from every land. And at the center of it all, Mogadishu. Not the Mogadishu the world shows you today, but a Mogadishu of grand stone houses, bustling markets, goldsmiths, textile masters, and world-renowned traders. A Mogadishu so influential that it minted its own currency, my people. Yes, coins found as far away as the Arabian Peninsula. Think about that. A city on the African coast controlling the economic bloodstream of the Indian Ocean. But Somalia's dominance wasn't just economic. It was also cultural, diplomatic, and strategic. Somalis became the bridge between Africa in the rest of the world, carrying goods, ideas, religions, and technologies across oceans. People travel to Somali cities to study, to trade, to learn navigation. And many of the traders who shaped the Swahili coast carried Somali influence and expertise. This was not a nation sitting in darkness. This was a nation illuminating a whole region. And here's the part that amazes historians. Somalis did all of this without a centralized empire, without kings ruling over millions, without the massive bureaucracies that defined other civilizations. They achieved global influence with a decentralized, mobile, community-driven system that Europeans could never understand and never defeat. Somalia was not on the margins of history. My people, Somalia was history. Here's something the world never appreciates about Somalia. It is the largest pastoralist society on earth, and that made it one of the hardest nations in Africa to colonize. You see, most empires are built on cities, palaces, and borders. But Somalia's power was built on something far more resilient: mobility, mastery of the land, and the camel, the engine of Somali civilization. For thousands of years, the camel was not just an animal in Somalia. It was wealth. It was transport. It was technology. It was survival. A single camel could carry a family across lands where empires collapsed from thirst. It could transport goods across deserts that no army could cross. It allowed Somali clans to move with the seasons, adapt to the environment, and remain completely independent from foreign powers. So when colonizers arrived expecting to conquer a territory, they didn't understand something fundamental. Somalia was not a territory. Somalia was a movement. How do you trap a nation that doesn't stay still? Ooh. How do you impose rule on people who do not rely on your roads, your cities, or your infrastructure? How do you conquer a society whose very identity is built on freedom? European powers quickly learned. They could occupy the coast. They could map the land. They could sign treaties on paper. But they could not break the Somali spirit. And at the heart of that spirit was Xir, one of Africa's oldest systems of customary law, a decentralized network of elders, negotiators, arbitrators who resolved disputes, set rules, and maintained social order without kings, without colonial courts, without foreign judges. In other words, Somalis had already built a functioning legal system long before Europeans showed up pretending to bring civilization. This combination, a mobile, pastoralist economy plus a decentralized ancient legal order, created a society that was incredibly difficult to control, incredibly unified in crisis, and incredibly ready to resist an empire. And that brings us to one of the greatest stories in African history, one that almost nobody talks about: Somali's 21-year war against the British Empire. Not a skirmish, not a rebellion, a full-on multi-decade war led by one of Africa's most misunderstood historical giants. So here's how it happened. When Europe carved up Africa at the Berlin Conference in 1884, the British looked at the Horn of Africa and assumed Somalia would be easy to control. But guess what? They were wrong. Because in 1899, something happened that shook the entire colonial world. A Somali leader rose up and launched one of the longest, strongest anti-colonial movements in African history. His name was Sayyid Muhammad Abdullah Hassan, known to his people as a poet, a scholar, a warrior, and known to the British as something else: the Mad Mullah. Yeah, they gave him that name not because he was mad, but because he refused to kneel. He united clans that had never united before. He built a standing army. He created the Dervish state, a functioning Somali government that stretched across the north. And for 21 straight years, my people, he fought the British, the Italians, and the Ethiopians, three powers working together, and he beat them again and again and again. Think about that. Most African resistances lasted months. Some lasted a few years. Somalia fought an empire for 2 decades. The British were humiliated. They tried diplomacy. They tried bribery. They sent 17,000 troops at one point and still failed. So finally, in desperation, guess what they did? They turned to something the world had barely seen: airplanes. In 1920, the British Royal Air Force launched the first aerial bombing campaign in African history. Not in Egypt, not in South Africa, but against Somalia. That is what it took to break the dervishes. Not negotiation, not ground troops, not colonial civilization efforts. Planes, bombs, technology so new that even Europeans scarcely understood its power. And even then, the dervish leader escaped, regrouped, and remained undefeated until illness claimed his life. My people, let me be clear. Somalia did not fall easily. Somalia did not fall quickly. Somalia did not fall without shaking an empire to its core. The resistance was so fierce, so relentless, that British generals admitted in their own reports that Somali fighters displayed bravery and discipline unmatched in the region. This chapter matters because it destroys the stereotype that Somalia is naturally chaotic or unruly. No. Somalia resisted because Somalia was strong, because Somalia understood freedom, because Somalia had a political and cultural identity worth fighting for. And the legacy of that fight shaped everything that came next: the rise, the unity, and eventually, the devastating fall.
This is frankly a pretty scary city. We've had to hire 8 gunmen to protect us from the warlords, the local militias.
I've been visiting Mogadishu for 21 years now, fairly regularly. And it's sad to say that even today we still need so much security, guards in front, guards behind, an armoured convoy to protect us. It's a sign of quite how fragile things are still. So what have you been given here? Some sugar, and below sorghum. And how long will that feed your family? We're right on the front line here. Bullets cracking all around us, and there's a man here quietly praying. We are just maybe a few meters from the front lines. Al-Shabaab positions ahead of us, the African Union behind.
My people, when most people hear the word Mogadishu today, they think of conflict, destruction, and instability. But long before it was reduced to a war zone, Mogadishu was one of the most important cities in the entire Indian Ocean world. Let's take it back. For centuries, Mogadishu was a city of stone palaces, coral houses, bustling markets, and wealthy merchant families. A cosmopolitan capital that welcomed traders from Arabia, Persia, India, and China. Chinese explorers from the Ming Dynasty wrote about Mogadishu with admiration, describing a city of fine buildings, skilled artisans, and markets overflowing with textiles, gold, spices, and leather. Arab geographers called it the city of Islam in East Africa, a center of scholarship, commerce, and culture. And here's a detail most people have never heard. Mogadishu minted its own currency. Coins stamped in Somali found their way across the Red Sea. Proof that this wasn't a small coastal town. This was a global financial hub. But the real power of Mogadishu was not the buildings, not the trade, not even the wealth. This was a place where scholars debated theology and law. Merchants negotiated deals stretching from Cairo to Calicut. Sailors trained in navigation that Europeans had not yet mastered. It was a multicultural capital long before the word globalization existed. And here's the part people never imagined. Mogadishu influenced the entire Swahili coast, its architecture, its language, its trade systems. Somali merchants and settlers helped shape the cultural DNA of coastal East Africa. So when the world looks at Somalia today and sees only struggle, they are looking at a single moment in time and ignoring centuries where Mogadishu stood as a beacon of strength, sophistication, and global connection. A place that didn't need Europe's approval. A place that set its own standards. A place that thrived. But my people, history is not a straight line. Because after centuries of power, Somalia would rise again in the 20th century, briefly, brilliantly, before falling into one of the most painful collapses Africa has ever seen. And to understand that rise, we must look at the moment when Somalia became one of the most unified, educated, and ambitious nations on the continent. The Golden Age. So after centuries of maritime power, after decades of resistance against empire, Somalia entered the 1970s with something rare in Africa: unity, ambition, and a vision for the future. This period, often forgotten in global memory, was one of the most extraordinary transformations in modern African history. Because in the 1970s and 80s, Somalia did something the experts said was impossible. Somalia became one of the most literate countries in Africa. Now, let me say that again. A nomadic, decentralized society that Europeans once dismissed as backward launched the largest literacy campaign in the continent's history. Teachers traveled deep into the desert, teaching nomads to read and write. Somali using a newly standardized script. People learned literacy around campfires, under trees, on caravans. UNESCO called it one of the most successful literacy drives the world had ever seen. But Somalia didn't stop there. It built one of the strongest militaries in Africa. By the late 1970s, Somalia's army was considered the most powerful in the region. Disciplined, well-trained, and equipped. A military so respected that global powers competed for Somalia's alliance during the Cold War. Not because Somalia was weak, but because Somalia was strategic. It sat on the Red Sea, the artery of global trade. And then came culture. Somalia invested in Somali identity, talking language, poetry, the arts, national broadcasting, education. Somali poets, journalists, filmmakers, scholars, they shaped a national consciousness unlike anything the region had seen. For the first time in modern history, Somalis across clans, coasts, and deserts felt a shared pride, a shared purpose, and yes, a shared dream. Economically, Somalia was no giant, but it was stable, functional, a nation climbing slowly but surely toward a future it believed in. Now, for many Africans who lived through that era, Somalia was a country on the rise, a country with potential, with unity, with direction. This is why the collapse that came next was so devastating. Because a nation that had achieved literacy, stability, and regional influence did not collapse because Somalis were incapable. It collapsed because of forces, internal and external, that tore a rising nation apart. And my people, this is the part of the story the world thinks it knows. But they only know the ending, not the journey. Because Somalia did not collapse out of nowhere. Civil war did not appear from thin air. And Somalis did not suddenly become the people the headlines portray today. The truth is far more painful, yes, far more complicated, and far more revealing about how nations fall. Let's break it down. By the early 1980s, Somalia's government, which was once a unifying force, became increasingly authoritarian. Political opposition was silenced. Communities felt marginalized. Clan tensions that had been suppressed began to resurface. Unity turned into suspicion. Suspicion turned into resentment. And resentment in any nation becomes fuel. Then came the global powers. Somalia had been a prized ally of the United States and the Soviet Union. Not because of democracy, not because of development, but because of location. But when the Cold War shifted, both superpowers dropped Somalia almost overnight. Aid dried up, arms shipments stopped, the alliances evaporated into thin air. My people, no country survives that kind of whiplash, especially not one still building its institutions. Then came the Ogaden War, a turning point. Somalia's attempt to unify Somalia-speaking regions in Ethiopia, a dream fueled by nationalism, turned into a catastrophic military defeat. The army that once symbolized strength came home broken, fractured, exhausted. Confidence collapsed. Economy collapsed. Faith in leadership collapsed. And once trust breaks, a nation's cracks widen fast. By 1991, the government fell. Institutions dissolved. There was no central authority, and clan-based militias filled the vacuum. Somalia became a battlefield of competing visions and wounded identities. Not because Somalis chose chaos, but because the structure holding the country together had evaporated. Imagine waking up one day and the police, the courts, the ministries, the schools, all gone. This is what happened. But you know what the worst part of all of this was? The world watched and then walked away. Foreign intervention made things worse. The U.S. sent troops. The UN failed to understand local dynamics. Aid became a weapon. Clan divisions deepened. Mistakes piled on top of mistakes. And when those mistakes backfired, when the mission became messy, complicated, and politically inconvenient, the world did what it always does to Black nations in crisis. They left. Just like what's happening to Haiti today. A country facing unimaginable hardship. A country the world helped destabilize through centuries of interference. A country that needed long-term partnership was abandoned the moment global powers lost interest. The same playbook. Oversimplify the crisis, intervene without context, make the situation worse, then walk away and blame the people for the chaos you helped create. After the Black Hawk Down incident, the world pulled out, leaving Somalia in even worse condition. Somalia became the symbol of a failed state, not because Somalis wanted to fail, but because abandonment and mismanagement made collapse deeper. But my people, even in collapse, Somalia did not die. And this is the part history books always skip. After everything Somalia has endured, the collapse, the violence, the hunger, the abandonment, you would expect a nation to break. Somalis did not break. In fact, something remarkable has been happening quietly. Somalia has been rebuilding itself, not with perfect institutions, but with an unbreakable people. The diaspora is thriving across the world. Doctors, engineers, CEOs, members of Congress. Somalis sending over $1 billion home every year to keep families alive and businesses running. That is resilience. That is power. In the north, Somaliland has shown the world what Somali stability looks like when left alone. Peaceful elections, functioning systems, calm streets, and even Mogadishu, the city the world called lost, is rising again with new businesses, new infrastructure, and a new generation that refuses to inherit the trauma of the past. More than 70% of Somalis today are under 30. They were born in hardship, but they are dreaming in possibility. And here's the truth the world keeps missing. Somalia is strategically powerful. It sits on the Red Sea, one of the most important trade routes on earth. As global powers fight for influence, Somalia's value only grows. So no, Somalia is not defined by collapse. It has to be defined by survival, by reinvention, by a spirit that refuses to die. Because this is the real story. A nation that once ruled the Indian Ocean, a nation that resisted an empire for 21 years, a nation that achieved one of Africa's greatest literacy campaigns, a nation that collapsed but rebuilt itself from nothing. Somalia is more than the headlines, more than the stereotypes, more than the insults of politicians who don't know history. Somalia is still writing its story, and if we pay attention, its next chapter might shock the world. Now, my people, I want to hear from you. Did you know this powerful history about Somalia? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what stood out to you, what surprised you, and what you think the world needs to understand about Somalia's story. And do me a favor, share this video in your group chats. Let's amplify this message and help rewrite Somalia's narrative together. And if you haven't already, join our membership family. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stay connected so you never miss another breakdown. That's it for today's show. Thanks so much for sticking with me. I'm Sandra Bebu Boateng, and until next time, take care.
Yes, greetings. We're there with you throughout this night here. So, the continent and Al-Kubalan, Africa, is rich within the soil, but it's rich in history. It's rich in our contributions to the world, human beings. It is not as devastating as the Caucasians have made us to be. Now, from listening to that, you will understand or realize the destabilizing tactics that the Americans have used and are using within the Sahel, within Congo, within Somalia for so many years. And then Barack sent AFRICOM, or developed AFRICOM on the continent. So when the people look like us and they camouflage themselves, then they say that we have terrorists and so much unrest. Then later on they say Al-Qaeda, ISIS, all kind of different titles. And it's them who have created these problems and have the international mercenaries on our land. The number of peoples on the continent, if one was to sit and think, would you be saying that the peoples of the continent of Africa are illiterate? Would you all be also saying that they did not have a history, only that which was told by Caucasians? We didn't scribe, but yet still we had papyrus. We didn't build, but yet still we have so much monuments all over the continent. And just to let the world know, which they do know, the pyramids are in Africa. And the bronze are in Africa. And the smelting of iron are in Africa. Agriculture, Africa. Irrigation systems, Africa. Should we continue? But what is this all about? It's all about how African Americans are being treated right now, and how African Americans, some of them are deciding to treat or feel to treat or be educated and brainwashed to treat Africans. And they want to do this. They are disconnecting. Some of them have disconnected themselves from Africa. And maybe we should realize that a lot of African Americans have returned or have visited or are living. We need to go home. We need to work with Africa. We need to link ourselves with Africa because it's our home. Stop letting people fool us. So tomorrow I want to continue this because I had a problem and I'm stubborn, so I wouldn't give up. But my stubbornness wasn't a good one because I should have done what I needed to do. I should have done early. So I'm going to give you like 3 songs that's most appropriate to this situation here, which I always do. And tomorrow we will continue this because I have neighbors and we're coming up to 12 o'clock. But Africa is what we are dealing with, and Pan-Africanism is what we're dealing with, and Al-Islam is what I will die with. So don't get nothing twisted.
And so rough. In this time of evil vibes, you've got to be rough. Some of us become foolish, cause we not penny wise, and then turn gruff. Yes, in this time of evil vibes, you've got to be tough. Some of us become foolish, cause we not penny wise.
See, it's when you listen over here, so you hear sensible things, you know, because we not play with them, you know. You understand? We're not in the skin up and everything, and we not tell you something that we not believe in and we not live by. You understand? Serious thing. Right? So that's why I have to say all the things I say, and then I turn make you know say my life and death is Al-Islam. Because I'm not going to give some short change and just try and make myself into something that I'm not. You understand me? And I do hope that I stick to it. Not to Islam, stick to telling the truth, the whole truth. The only truth that I know, because I don't know no other one. I want to know freedom. I want to taste freedom. I want to live. Hey, I want to experience freedom before me die. You understand me? So hear this tune again now. Come here, my brother. I am this one here, I'm a brethren. Come up, sir. What? Hey, this son is about 12 to 13 years old, you know. Come here.
Let your kingdom come, and the millennium is here now. So make me live as one in Ethiopia, from this little island in Jamaica, away from the gates of Africa. It's been a long time coming, so I and I must keep on moving. in slavery, been prosecuted by society. But the motherland is calling for her children to come home.
Serious thing, man. I tell you. That's why I call it my reggae Bible, you know. You can't do nothing with me. Nothing. Anybody who want to follow me, but don't try to copy me because you will fall in a ditch. You understand? You have to know the program. It's not about plucking 1 and 2 tune that you can find out of what me play and them say, yeah, you have something. No. Huh? Rehearse proper and then come original. So don't just copy, you know? Rehearse proper. So here we go again. Come here. This one here, about 12, 13 years as well. Come.
Hey, mankind, you gotta look back now. Hey, mankind, you gotta look back. Hey, mankind, you gotta look back. Life is a mystery for us to reveal. History has revealed what the mystery is. We need love and unity. Love is for us to live. You got no enemies. Now that your heart is free. The one who have more than what you really need. Got things and plans that belongs to another man. The more you want, the less them gonna have. Come let it flow, one and all to take part. Hey mankind, you gotta look back. Hey mankind, you gotta look back. I like to look back. I like to check my past. What I've been doing wrong.
Yo, you see them lyrics, eh? And then everyday lyrics, you know. You understand? So we say guidance until tomorrow, God willing, right? So we just come in because I had to persevere. And you see the water, you know, and this is Angola. You see when you, hey, yo, listen here. Oh gosh, man. Cause that's Africa, you know. That's not no smoke screening. That's a real thing. That real, not thing. You understand me? So we say, all right, where you there? Come up.
From the south of the you can hear what the good brother say. Musical sounds coming down with me. Now this is a musical sensation that is shaking the whole nation. And you can feel the vibration. This musical disc was created from creation, shaking you from the #1 station. As the brother would tell you, hey, so man, you can hear the good brother say, now since the war is over, it'll be like crimson and clover. Even them that deal with violence, they should look down in silence. And you can hear the brother say, no war, brothers and sisters, the war is over.
Yeah, you know, so we want you to keep watching the ICC, because the people them get threatened, left, right, and center, you know. Man, them must say that they're going to stop the funding, and the next one say them sanctioning them, and all these things, you know what I mean? So we have to, I am saying, we have to keep an eye on that. And we have to keep an eye on South Africa, because South Africa, they're roast breadfruit. Too much coconut inside the mix. They're selling us out in a strange way, South Africa. a lot of ministers in South Africa is not with us. And the changes in the condition for the people them has not happened. We were a smoke screen with Mandela being president and Mbeki. But the conditions have remained the same and the most atrocious. People still live in zinc pan. And unemployed. And those who have employment are like slave chain gangs. You understand? They might build the roads, they might dig trenches and all kind of thing, and so forth, mines and all these things. South Africa. Don't let the United Nations, the UN, fool us. Eh? And that little skirmish with that man talking about Caucasians them being killed. No. The people them have the best land. Not the best land. Them just take what they want. And agriculture, produce, is fueling the whole of Europe for years and years and years and years out of South Africa. And the richness of South Africa is Caucasians. And there are areas in South Africa when a black person's people them can go, Africans can go, unless they're working there as servants and maids and everything. Factual. Eh? The multi-billionaires them out in the world right now are South Africans. Eh? The exploitations of African inventors, and we have to call it exploitation because they not share the wealth with those young men and women who have created batteries and all kind of thing with this resourceful motor vehicles and so on. You understand? And other things, a lot of other things that these these peoples, male and female, and in that same area have been supported, but they weren't started in the initial stage. Is that people talk about them, and then someone come and examine what they're hearing and look at it, and then them take them, and now they've been isolated because they're creators. Their minds are very good. You understand? And a lot of internet development, yeah, is coming straight out of there. Don't let the X fool you. I tell you, even though it's a good resource, don't make it fool us to think, say, that the Africans don't have nothing to do with it. Don't let AI confuse you all too and think, say, that we don't have nothing to do with it. You understand? It is that they are turning it around to do things for them. You understand? So I'm just telling you, the exploitation of South Africa remains. Apartheid remains. It's a 21st century apartheid. It has so much despicable trails within it. But tomorrow, we're gone again. Come here.